What's going on? We're back with another Feature Friday. We got our good friend here. I'll let Aaliyah introduce her.
All right, and before I introduce her, I just want to remind y'all that Season 2 is brought to you by the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative. And for our guest this evening, it's Vanessa Hartley. Vanessa, thank you so much for getting on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you. So maybe we'll start off by you just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about your upbringing.
Okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Usually when I introduce myself, it's like a panel or a presentation, but I'll try to be a little more personable this evening. I know both of you from some experiences working, so I feel like I can do so.
Yeah.
You know me, you know where I'm from. I'm from Shelburne, Nova Scotia. Very proud to come from my hometown in Shelburne as a Black Loyalist, 8th generation. And I think maybe I'll start there with some of the history of Shelburne just to set the context. I think that would be good.
That's great. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, cool. So my last name is Hartley, but it's really not. I'm a farmer by blood. So my father was, his mother was a Hartley, and his father was a farmer. And for a really long time, I thought that my dad's side of the family came from Halifax. So there was a really big question mark around who I was, who my dad's side of the family was, and kind of the connection to the Black Loyalist. And I'll never forget it because it was when I really found pride in the African Nova Scotian culture and heritage. But I was 16 and had a lot of questions about who I was and who I wanted to be. And I started digging into genealogical files at the Black Loyalist Heritage Centre and started asking my family a lot of tough questions. And they were like Vanessa, go easy, stop stirring the pot, stop asking questions. And I think from that point on, I got really good at asking tough questions and making things really uncomfortable for people that I loved and cared about, but also just in general. And I started to realize, oh, wow, my family has always been from Shelburne. And we've have like 4 strong lineages from the Book of Negroes, so straight from the Americas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a interesting lens. And I feel like that really allowed me to tap more into becoming who I am today. But all of that to say, I descend from the farmers, the Hartleys, the Jacklins, the Morrisons, the Drummons, and it was all in Shelburne. It was all in Birchtown. So that's a little bit about, I'd say, my family and my heritage.
So when you were asking the questions, it was your family, and they were like, "Stop asking so many questions."
Yeah. So my grandmother, my nanny, was like to my father, "Why did she ask me so many questions?" And she was giving Dad all these looks like, what's going on? We went out for supper. And, this was supposed to be a nice time, and now you're disrupting me with all these questions. And I was like, not trying to do that, of course, but I was so curious and like, what was our story as a family, and how did we get here, and how did we survive in such a hard time? It was a hardship to grow up in Shelburne in that time, especially for my grandmother and my father. So I wanted to learn more about what they had been through, to have more respect and to cherish what I went through, but also to ensure that my little siblings and my younger brothers would respect and honor that we have a path in front of us too, from our family.
Yeah.
Are you able to like dive deeper into like what your perspective is on how your grandparents, your family had came there, and then maybe the contrast of what it was like for them versus what it's like for you guys nowadays?
Absolutely, yeah. Because the history is so deep. So, our community was the first to have a race riot in North America. So I think that the culture in Shelburne has not really changed drastically. I think that there's a lot of discrete or hidden racism or tendencies that translate from that day. But for my grandmother and my father, it was extremely racist. At the time, my dad and my grandmother grew up in the South End. Grew up on Parr Street. I was born and also raised in Parr Street as well. Have fond but also poor memories of Parr Street. And my family lived next to the dump in the South End. And so they went to school, smelling like smoke or seeing the smoke. My dad would tell me stories about him playing on the dump when he was young, the rats that would come out of it, or the aerosol cans that were surrounding the community. So I guess for me, I didn't necessarily see that part of the community. I remember, being on my bike and playing and running and being free and having fun in the South End with my cousins and my family. And I think now, having perspective and lived experience, I cherish those memories more so than maybe the memories of, you know, my elders or my other family that have experienced some real injustices.
Okay, so on that note, would your parents' experiences, especially by living by a dump, I feel like that's a common, there's a lot of themes with African Nova Scotian communities and their environment. So do you feel like, when did your spark kind of hit where you wanted to be like interested in environmental racism? Because we both know, I mean, you could also explain to the audience that environmental racism and injustice is something that I feel like strongly something you pursue. So when did that kind of, was it that conversation with your parents that started that spark? No. When did that start?
I would say my spark started in grade 7.
Okay.
I had no idea about Black history. I never learned about it. And I remember reading the book, The Children of Africville.
Yeah.
And that was devastating. And at the time, I didn't realize that, you know, there was tenets of and elements of environmental injustice and racism happening in that community. But I was so heavily able to relate to this story and the feeling of what that felt like. And so I think for me, that was the first time where I felt as a young person, like, okay, I need to not only like be active in learning about these things, but I need to speak up and feel comfortable in spaces where I might not feel represented or I might not feel, you know, courageous, but to do it anyway. So I would say that was probably the first spark I had around racism and systemic racism. And even environmental racism, but not really knowing at a young age what that was.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I feel like a lot of the, I feel like the green economy and stuff has really sparked the past, what was it, decade, I feel like, or past 5 years. And for you to have that interest, not knowing as well, but like at that age is very, very impressive. So I'm glad that you were able to get in those roles.
Thank you.
So I also would love if you could just highlight some of the work that you're doing, the important work that you do. Yeah.
Thank you. Some of the work that I'm doing on environmental racism and injustice. I have a hard time identifying myself to the work. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like to say I'm doing this because I feel like it's such a pressing issue for the community that it's not really just me. It can never just be me. And if it's going to be a legacy to continue in good faith, and everybody needs to be a part of that, not just one person. And it makes me think about a friend told me this once. She said, when I create my art and I give it to the world, it no longer becomes my art. And I think about that a lot with advocacy in the work is like, when I finish something or when I do something for the community, it's not, it is for my family and for me, but it's also for everyone. So I try to take an approach that's like, I don't love saying I'm doing this or I'm doing this. So it's a little difficult to talk about, but right now, what am I doing in that space? Right now, I am trying to lead and manage a community-led nonprofit. So in March 2024, the beginning of the Center for Environmental Justice started from like-minded community members and folks. So that's what I've been really working on in the South End.
Okay, very cool.
Would maybe both of you guys probably explain to the audience what environmental racism is?
Yeah. What is environmental racism? Great question. And I get this a lot. And, you know, I've explained it to various of folks from, you know, elders to community residents to young children to high school children. So how can I put this in a simple way? I like to define it because it's a very interesting intersection because you have the environment in which you live in, and then you have a social injustice. And when you bring it together, you get environmental racism. And so for African Nova Scotian communities, obviously this is exacerbated in our communities, right? Like when we think about the historical context of how this is happening, it's often African Nova Scotian communities, right? With Lincolnville, Africville, Shelburne, you know, Sydney Tar Ponds. And then when we go into Indigenous and Mi'kmaq communities, you know, there's over 6 historical cases in Nova Scotia. So I think for me, environmental racism is an extremely important topic. And I really do believe that when we start to underpin some of the systems that enable environmental racism, you only make more equitable and just systems for the social justice piece, but then you also inherently strengthen the environment in which a person lives in. So you're increasing the quality of life and their well-being overall. So I personally believe, that's why I'm so passionate about it, and I'm getting a little fired up now, is like, you know, when you take these 2 really important, you know, indicators, in policy, we'll say, and you pair them together, they're really hard to separate when we look at health and you know, quality of life. But also for African Nova Scotians, the connection to land is so significant. And when you take, you know, a more holistic approach to this issue, it's very concerning. So it's like, you know, how are our communities reconnecting with water and land and land-based activities when we never really had the space to do so, or it wasn't seen as safe or clean. And you start to internalize that and kind of associate that with the self, with the soul. So these are really, really pressing concerns for not only just African Nova Scotian and Mi'kmaq communities, but for all of Nova Scotia. And I really, really wish people would understand it impacts us all, just various levels, but at the same time, we are all people. Yeah. And so it is a little hard when we bring that social context level into the environment, because people are like, how is the environment racist? Well, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that decisions and decision makers and policy makers, you know, drive and make this an issue for our communities. So it can be a challenging space to work in, because then you also have environmental justice, which is a completely different ball game than environmental racism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I resonated with what you were saying about community and how we're so attached to it. And why do you think we're so attached to it? Like as Black people, like what do you think? Like why am I? Because I'm from North Preston, and I feel like that's so home, and that's so like I wouldn't want to let my land go, and all this stuff is like, why are we so attached? Versus like some of my like non-Black friends, they like, I live on Summer Street, and I don't care if I sell my house, and this street may not mean nothing to them. Like I got my street tatted on my arm, so it's like
a
lot of pride in it.
Yeah,
I think that because I mean I don't know all the answer to that, but and I've learned that as well. You don't give out advice because you never really know. I learned my lesson there. But I think if I'm speaking from experience, why I feel such a strong connection to the land is, well, you know, I think at the end of the day, individuals connect to nature. But also I think like when we think about, you know, the struggles to getting to Nova Scotia through the water, I think inherently that's something that continues in our legacy as African Nova Scotians. But also speaking to the sense of community, you feel like you belong. You feel like you're needed in your space, especially if you're someone that, you know, is there on a real level. Like, you know, you're walking through your community and you're connecting with your elders. You're ensuring that knowledge is getting passed on, and you see it with value, and then you bring that value in turn. So I think it's about respecting your space. You have way more ownership. But then it's also about the relationship of reciprocity with the land. You know, like for me, I feel like those trees in Birchtown mean something to me. And when I go and I sit there and I connect with my ancestors, I offer gratitude. And I know that struggle and that pain was not for nothing, because here we are today and we still rise. So I think for me, there's a really strong power and connection to, as African Nova Scotians, our spiritual connection to this land, but also recognizing the harms that have been done on this land as well. I think it's really hard for us to separate that when we think about those 400 years we've been here. We continue to be here, but that means something. And that's powerful. Like I even get chills saying that and calling on that. Like, you know, it's, That was a really good answer for sure. And it's like speaking to like stewardship of a land and like identity and that connection piece, like you said, reciprocating. That was a beautiful answer. I mean, another question I had kind of a little bit from earlier, research. So was there a lot of research that you had participated in, and what were those outcomes and I guess the study findings when you'd participate in that research? Oh gosh.
Yeah. I'd love to hear that.
I never really understood that I liked research. Like you might not believe this about me, but when I was in school, I wasn't academic. I didn't consider myself smart. I didn't consider myself intelligent. Like I had a really hard time fitting in school, in that space. Yeah. And I didn't really care to figure out if I liked things either. Like I knew what I wasn't good at, but I didn't know what I was good at. And I think the system does a really good job of doing that on purpose to break us down. But you know, in my hobbies and asking questions, I realized I like to find the reason to why. And if I can't, I'll figure it out, you know, and that curiosity really, really got me. And then I realized, okay, when I can generate curiosity in a space that's safe or positive or even, you know, kind, you can get a lot of answers. So I started asking more, right?
Like the uncomfortable questions
Exactly.
you're asking your
I learned how to do it quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been so much research that's gone into, some of the initiatives in Shelburne, like just to name a couple. We recently just got our results back from the Genes and Geography study done with Dalhousie and McMaster. So that was a comparative study. We did focus groups and interviews with the residents of the South End to identify, what do you think is going on? Do you think it's the water? We're, speculating it's the water. In a court of law, it's not the water. So it's like, what do you think on a personal level? But then, how is it impacting you? So, measuring health outcomes and, documenting if folks are sick and what does this mean for them. But then on the other side, we actually took DNA from residents. Yeah, so over 50 residents were sampled, and we'll get those late this summer. And that is going to be, I feel that'll be very paramount to some of the investigations around the dump and the health outcomes for folks. I think that when we talk about research in a Western way, it's always academic. Yeah. There's a really huge lack of trust and also, I would say, autonomy when it comes to community-led research. Like I feel like in the space of academics and academia, people love to discredit our community because it's hearsay or it's anecdotal. But really, this is just who we are.
Oral
this tradition. Is how we, oral tradition. Ways of knowing, ways of seeing. And so I feel like there's a lot of work to be done within that space in researching and in academics, but I do enjoy it. I wish there was more that was community-led.
Yeah.
Is there some more context to the research that you were just talking about, the sampling and the dump? What's the background for that?
Okay, like why are we doing that?
Yeah. For like the audience, they might not know.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Would you like me to go into the story of the
please
dump?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do want to learn a lot about you, but we also want to learn about Shelburne and the background too.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, to set some context around what is happening in Shelburne, what's been happening in Shelburne is in the 1940s. I'm going to take you way back. I'm going to give you a timeline because this is where I'll touch on the research. But in the 1940s, the town of Shelburne decided we have a lot of waste and we need to get rid of this. What are we going to do? Yeah. And they consulted with the municipality of Shelburne. So the way that we're set up, we have a township, which is extremely old, which goes back to the white loyalist settlements. And then we have the municipality, which encompasses our second African Nova Scotian community. So we do have different types of structures when it comes to governance in the town. And this sets context because the town consulted with the municipality and said, where should we place this dump in the 1940s? And the first place they went was Birchtown, the Black community, right? And so at this time, 1940s, there's still a lot of Black African Nova Scotian families in the area. Now there's not. And they were going to place it under the name Fox Harbor. And so from this moment, this is when things really changed in our community for the ANS community. And a group of elders founded the Culture Society to preserve and to do an archaeological dig to prove to the municipality that, whoa, you haven't even touched this land in a positive way to show that we've been here. No, this is not going to happen, and we're going to protest this. So they pleaded their case, they won, and the sites were preserved. They later then dug sites in the area and found over, I think it was 3,500 pieces that are, African Nova Scotian Black Loyalist pieces from Birchtown. So some are actually in the museum today and some are in the archives in Halifax here. And so from there, they said, well, what's the next best option? Let's go to the second Black community in the municipality. So then they approach Mr. Jacklin. They approach him 3 times and ask him for his land. And so his land, the dump, was a farm. It supplied the community. And this is stuff that I've heard from elders and residents that, he was sufficient, he was fine. There was no need for the town to be coming in the back of town asking for town land, sorry.
So they're asking for his land or trying to buy it from him?
Well, they asked him for it once, twice, but then they took it from him the third time. So they actually demanded that if you don't give us this land, we'll take it from you in taxes. So they expropriated the land. Wow. And from there, the dump was established in 1943.
So this same dump that your parents were lived beside?
Yeah. Yeah, my grandparents and my father and my grandmother. So from there, the dump collected all kinds of waste from the municipality and the town. So like anything you can imagine, household garbage, white metals, goods, scraps, Navy base stuff. So the naval base that was in Sandy Point dumped there. They dumped what we believe to be radioactive waste. So there's community members that remember them coming in with hazmat suits on and dumping the waste. They also dumped waste from the hospital, so syringes and medical grade stuff. Yeah.
And this is like close by home. Like this
is like, and this is down the road.
Like
and it gets worse. Yeah. It absolutely gets worse because there is a wetland and a bog that runs through the entire community. Yeah, it's really horrible, and the fact that we haven't been listened to in this has been really upsetting to the community. So this is 1943.
So this makes sense to the environmental racism.
Exactly.
Like this is why the context and all this stuff. I'm getting it now.
Yeah. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
So we're at 1943.
Yeah.
There's so much to
and that's
today.
over a 3-year span. What you just talked about here. Yeah.
So they take the land. Cool. Yep. We're going to be starting to dump. Cool. So at this point it's a mount of garbage. They're like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
How do we get rid of this? We didn't foresee this being an issue. They start burning it. So until 1961, I think there was a news clipping that says the dump just keeps burning. And because they would burn and burn and burn, there was so much garbage, it would stay afire and it would just smolder and smolder. And they were burning carcinogenics. They, the air pollution that residents were exposed to for over 75 years is toxic. It's horrible. And it's literally killed our community.
Wow.
Yeah. And so 1961, they start asking questions and they do a soil survey. The Department of Environment and Climate Change does a soil survey. And these are all things that we FOIPOPed and have accessed. So we know that this happened. It's factual. Talk about research.
Yeah.
But in 1961, they tell us that, this is probably not a good spot to have a dump because the bedrock is so low and the leachate from the dump seeps through. Yeah. And because this isn't a first-generation landfill, this is a dump, there's no lining to protect from that creek, from the stream, from the bog, right?
Yeah.
So everything's pushing through.
It's like people's wells,
exactly.
bath water, all that shit.
Yeah,
everything, right? Yeah. So then we skip forward. Communities enduring all of this, right? Yeah. And, we have members of the community saying that the ash would fall down and it would leave marks on the car. Like it would ruin your car because it was so I don't even know what that would be, like acidic or toxic, right? Like it was burning paint off of cars essentially. So then 1994, Environment and Climate Change once again of Nova Scotia is like, we don't really have the proper mechanisms or legislation to protect people. So they come out with the Environmental Protection Act, which basically places all ownership to the province of landfills. So municipalities now become delineated through the Municipal Governance Act. They say, look, nope, you can't operate or own your own landfill, no more. So from that point on, 1994 to 2016, the dump continues. Regardless of provincial legislation, the dump continues until a resident calls and complains about an oil spill that they notice on the land. Again, stewardships of the land, right? This is why we're so connected to it because we have ownership of this space. Yeah. But they take 11 tons of soil that's been contaminated from the dump at that time. And then they finally close the dump in 2016. So at this time, this is where seed and grassroots movements are starting to ask really big questions that we have no answers to. And now we're in the process of the dump being cleaned up in a remediation project, a decommissioning.
So what are organizations like SEED? What are they called? What's the SEED stand for?
The South End Environmental and Justice Society. And they were founded by Louise DeLille in late 2016, more 15. Gosh, what a time.
So this big dump, was this owned by the government? Or so they took the land as, who's getting paid when people come dump the stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem today is that no one can really pinpoint jurisdiction or ownership to this space. So currently the town of Shelburne owns the land. However, it's not a dump or a landfill anymore. So the province can't do too much. And federally, it's a municipal or provincial problem. So we have 4 levels of government that we have to work through in this context, but it's very hard when nobody wants to take responsibility, for the issue.
All spread.
It's all mixed.
So have they been able to like clean the dump up or clean up the space to make it like livable or make it usable?
No, not at all. They were recommended by the province of Nova Scotia. The town of Shelburne was recommended to put in monitoring wells back in the 1960s when they also were told that this isn't suitable grounds for a landfill. They said you might want to be monitoring what's happening on this site because it's not safe. The recommendations from the report said you shouldn't be dumping here. This is not safe for surrounding neighborhoods, to the point where now you can't have a landfill or a dump within a kilometer of a residential zone.
Yeah.
So it's like, they failed to protect the community. And they continue to do so. The lack of cleanup, the inaction is literally killing our community. They're right now in the process of cleaning it up, which they're going to cap it. Again, another recommendation from 1960. So, decades of inaction has cost the community elders and mothers and brothers and fathers, uncles, grandparents. But they don't seem to get that. They don't seem to understand how we value our community is very different than how they see us.
Definitely. Wow. Yeah, it's so disappointing. I had someone come into a class once and also speak about genetic linkage as well due to the environment and cancers. There's a certain, I can't remember it right off the top of my head, but there's some conditions that are disproportionately affecting community members in that area because of the linkage or
what they've been exposed to.
Yes, like it's actually very, very bad. I guess maybe my next question is, how do you navigate those conversations with parties and government to express concerns from community? Yeah, like what's those uncomfortable conversations? Because this has been going on for,
great question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in the beginning, I was really upset. I really felt that the community had been wronged. And I wasn't necessarily leading from a space of positive intention, which now is really hard to see. I knew that my intention was good, but I didn't realize that I was coming from a place of anger or resentment. Yeah. And I'd say the conversations for me, I noticed that they started to shift when I internally did the work, when I started to change my own experiences, or when I started to change my own perspective. I lived a little more. I gained more information and knowledge. I stopped giving advice and started seeking it.
Learning experience,
right? I started seeking it, but I would say I started approaching conversations with the intention to help and to learn. Yeah, and I found in turn that made it easier for people on the other side. But I would also say I'm an emotional person. I'm an emotional being, and when I bring my emotion into spaces that aren't always wanted or needed, that also changed the conversation because, to look someone in the face and in the eyes and say, well, there's people in my community right now that don't have access to clean water, that sticks with them. When I share about, my family experiencing this or residents sharing with me stories upon stories about what it felt like to go to school and be called names and belittled because of where you live and how you smell because of something you can't control. That stuck with them. And I noticed the power of emotion. And I started to utilize that a little bit more.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like another thing that I also wanted to emphasize, because we said the research thing, that's the other thing that also bothers me with academia as well, because for decades this is going on and communities expressing their concerns. And a lot of times, I mean, I don't want to make an assumption, but there is quite a lot of times where there's sometimes like, oh, research gathered this, and that, rather than actually protecting and putting people's well-being as a priority in that process. So, yeah, I'm glad that you're shedding light to this issue because it's still ongoing and it's going to be a lot of work to.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what them results come back.
Yep,
and
me too.
Is there folks still living, obviously, in the community now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'd say it's more diversified now. So you do see a little bit of a mix. But it was a predominantly Black community. Yeah. I'm nervous, I have to say, to get the results back. Like, I got my DNA done, and my brother did, my mother did. And I had some other family members that did as well. Hopefully they're okay with me disclosing that. But, I'm a little nervous to be sat down and to be told my results. that, I might be carrying a gene or mutation due to the exposure of my dad, his mother, and then their mother and father. I have to say I'm expecting it.
Yeah.
I am. I'm not naive to that. Like what you were saying, iron itself, if it's consumed at a certain level, can impact 3 generations. So, we know that consuming and living in these environments will impact you negatively.
Yeah. And what, I have actually 2 questions. I'll start with one. What do you plan to do once you receive that information with the DNA? What's your next, or if you have thought about that next step as to what you're going to do with that?
That's a great question. I like to keep my cards close.
Nice.
There you go.
I never like to let them know what I'm doing.
Next
In a recent.
Oh no.
There might be some sneaky people watching.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. In a
intention.
recent webinar, they're asking questions, and then I'm getting phone calls from the press the next day, and I'm like, see, this is why I don't show my hand. I'll be honest and open, but then I also have to maintain that firm boundary of like, okay, I can't really comment on this because if I do, it might be utilized against me or weaponized.
Like
and that's really hard.
And when you're coming, they're like, oh yeah, we ready for you.
Yeah, we're weaponizing, they're prepping for whatever,
So we get it.
Good. I appreciate that answer too, because I think that's something for the audience to also learn is important, that you don't always got to give people that information.
Yeah,
Move in silence.
What is it? Keep your cards close.
Yeah.
Sometimes
don't show them your hand,
and
get the stuff done that you have to get done. I guess my next question was, you kind of answered it. Are they doing anything, I would put in the word of reparations or anything for community? Because to me, I'm like,
yeah, I thought about that a lot during this conversation.
Yeah, are they doing anything on their
and
part?
And who is they?
Who is they and what are they doing? Yeah. I know Louise is out there somewhere itching at this one because reparations is something that we've been talking a lot about internally with the CEJ. How do we define it as a community first and foremost? Because in the space of government, we know that we can't come to the table with questions that make us look like we're, not equipped or ill-equipped or not prepared or even too prepared. You got to come at a certain level when you're approaching government. And often you have to allow them to think that it's their idea and that they can kind of utilize it in a strategic manner, right?
She's got game.
There you go. You just let them think it's their idea and everything works out fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
But yes, we are trying to define this with the community to determine what we want to do. We're seeing federal legislation that, I'm going to call ECC out here in a bit. Like when you have a federal law that says in the space of redress for environmental racism, compensation for families and communities, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Expand
on it.
What are you interpreting that as? Because I see it as something, but I know that you don't see it the same way.
Yeah.
So for us internally, we're figuring out what that means. And for the who are they, we're holding those very pointed questions to some accountable actions and steps around, well, you committed to this. This is your legislation. What are the steps to getting to it? I'm not telling you mine.
Yeah.
I know what mine are. I can see what it is for the community, and we all see it together. But what are you doing?
I'm going to hold you to your part. Yeah. What
you said.
Yeah.
What you committed to.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I keep wanting to learn more about Shelburne and like the history and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful history.
Yeah, so because you said you guys were from the Americas or like from like the Book of Negroes and like you guys got a rich history.
Yeah.
Are you able to like maybe, obviously we can't go super deep or just give us like a summary or like give me some information on it because I'm super interested.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. I'll do that. I used to work at the museum, so I used to do this for a job.
Makes sense.
So
there's a museum out there too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a beautiful museum.
The timeline, because you be having the years right and everything. I'm like, this is tough.
That's tough.
Yeah.
See,
so good.
Another educational episode of Future Friday. Professor Hartley.
I'm really working for the title here today. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Historian, I should say.
I want to be a historian. I could have did that. Okay. No. But to take us back into the history a little bit, so my family came from Virginia off the plantations. And it's really hard to track past there because at that point we were documented as property. So you can't really find files or photos past a certain time frame, which is really sad and hard. But we obviously would have come from the continent, went to Virginia, and then from there, the history gets a little tense. So the American Revolutionary War was really the catalyst for freeing a lot of blacks. So the British were like, hey, any slaves that want to be free and live a good life, you get land, you'll have food, you'll have beautiful family, selling you the dream. Come fight for us. Make it to Boston Harbor. Fight for us against the Americans, your slave owners. Win, and you're free. So that's what happened. Thousands of, now to be free blacks fought for them in the Revolutionary War. They lost. And when they lost, of course, the Americans wanted their slaves back, but they couldn't do that. They had already said, nope, you're free because you fought for us. And so they brought them from that harbor into Nova Scotia, Port Roseway, now called Shelburne, because we have a beautiful harbor. It was very accessible. And the White Loyalists were already settled there. So they
came right to Shelburne Harbor?
Yeah.
From the boats?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they were documented in the Book of Negroes, and that's how it's connected to the British. That's where it's at now. It's in Britain. But yeah, it's a deep, deep, dark history that involves not only just Canadians, but the Americans. And so when I was in Washington for a conference, oh, what a time to be alive, because I went to go visit the African-American Museum. And to see the Black Loyalist on that wall, I said, I never want to hear from another person in Nova Scotia that we haven't been here. Because they know about us in Washington.
Yeah.
Here we are in their history, but what about our history?
Yeah.
Right? You want to make us forget in Canada, but outside of these walls, we exist. And we left impact. So I think for me, that was another kind of like boost of motivation to just like stand strong in who I am as a Black Loyalist. Yeah, that lineage.
I have a question.
She's a soldier.
Yeah, soldier. You speak so passionately about this stuff, and who or what inspires you? There's a lot of strength behind the words that you say and the way you speak about this stuff. Is there like an inspiration, whether it be someone or a group of people that keep you going?
It's a good question. There's so many. There's so many people that keep me going. And even like preparing for this, like, I've watched a couple to see like what kind of questions you folks are asking. Definitely did check it out. And I was like, these are some good questions. And it had me reflecting, like, who were the ones showing up for me when I needed it? And they always didn't look like me. I'll have to say, like growing up with a white mom and a Black dad, I had a lot of privilege in having a lot of people that see me before I see myself, but they had the privilege to see themselves like that, right? Like where maybe people on my dad's side or maybe people that looked like me didn't really have that confidence or that experience in life to channel that. So yeah, I've had a lot of amazing role models and family members and elders and grandparents show me the way in ways that I'm still learning. But also, I think for me, I always think about my brothers. I think growing up, I was the oldest sister, and from a very young age, I knew that I had to be a protector and that nobody was messing with mine. And so I think that carried on into the community work that I did. And when I realized how much, the community had experienced injustice and was messed with, that really upset me. And I wanted to be there for my community like I was for my family.
Wow. I like that answer. I find, correct me if I'm wrong, but you knowing your history and like knowing it so deeply that you do, I feel like that's one of the things that ignite the flame in you. And I feel like that's a trend in like a lot of the folks that we interview here. The folks that know where they came from and know their history, I feel like they have, it could be like a thing where like obviously like the ancestors are on your back and it's like, I'm fighting for them. Yeah. They fought for me to get us here. And it's like, I'm pushing forward for that. And I find like maybe some folks that aren't really connected to their history or don't really know their history, I feel like they don't have that that motivation, or there's a word I'm trying to find, but it's like they don't have that grounding or that fuel to like make them push or fight, because they might think like, I'm just a Black person in Nova Scotia, ANS. What, you know what I mean? Some folks don't even know the terms ANS. So it's like like, who am I? So a lot of Black folks might not know who they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Black folks that know who they are have strength. So it's like knowing where you came from, you know where you're going. So then you have a fight to fight. Like some folks, they don't have a fight to fight, so they don't have the fight. Does that like make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think that's been foundational in anything that I've been able to do and had the opportunity to do. First is God, but second has been my community and being rooted in community. And I noticed that I loved Halifax, but I wasn't rooted in Halifax. This isn't where my people were from. And I felt that and I knew that. And that's ultimately what took me home, was knowing that my people, my community, the love for it was so much stronger than any job or any amount of money could ever offer me. So sticking to who I was and my values was something that was tested a lot in government and something that was tested a lot in my career. But I think being able to find my way back home has always been key for me.
Yeah, being purpose driven.
Yeah.
You got me having a million questions right now. I want to go back a little bit. So speaking about like basically identity and finding yourself, you mentioned there was a time where you didn't know that and then you transitioned to knowing. Could you kind of maybe contrast how you felt before and after you did that question asking?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's going to be interesting. How did I feel when I wasn't me?
Felt disconnected.
Yeah, when I wasn't me, because I see myself as me now. But for a long time, I was hiding in, shoes of who I thought I should be or who I thought my parents wanted me to be or things that I needed to do or responsibilities placed on me. So I growing up, I didn't really have a lot of space where I felt like I could be myself authentically. I was an athlete, so I think I was painted with that brush a lot of the time. Like people just see me as one thing. And I love
feel that.
You feel that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when people are like,
Put you in
oh,
a box.
you actually can do this, or, oh, you're funny. I'm like, I've been funny.
I have a personality.
I've been funny. I've been waiting for y'all to catch on.
Right? It's like y'all late to the party, man.
So I think for me, like I was afraid to show who I was to the world because people just judged or thought they knew me before they really did. And so I think, I internalized that a lot, and I was afraid to come out of my shell for certain things or certain people and experiences. And now it's so different. Like I'd say I'm still growing a lot and maturing, because I thought I was mature when I definitely wasn't, right? Like I was 19. I thought, oh yeah, I knew everything.
You're like, that's it. Yeah.
Right? I did it all.
Yeah.
No, still doing it all,
Yeah.
right? Like still learning. But I would say how I feel now is, I guess what I would say to anyone that, is still finding themselves or like searching for themselves or doesn't have that confidence is everybody's walking through life with their own crap. And if this is what I think about, and if you throw it into a bag with like the whole world, right? You really got to zoom out and see yourself as just a person living an experience in earth. And it's like, you throw your stuff in, you would take it in a minute. I know I would take my stuff in a minute. And I think finding gratitude in my journey and my experience is what allowed me to have passion, confidence, and the self-esteem to do things from my heart and not feeling like, oh, well, I got to walk this life because this is what someone said. No. It's what I say, it's what I create, and it's how I design it. So if I'm not out there chasing what I want, it ain't going to come to me. So I got to go get out of my own way and get into a new perspective, a new being of like, if I'm not going to do it, someone else is going to do it. And if I say I want to do it and I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, right? So it's like having that drive to get out of your own way and seeing yourself in a new light, like seeing yourself as competent, seeing yourself as a confident being, seeing yourself like as worthy as well,
capable.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's really important. And I didn't have those. I didn't have those qualities in myself as a young person. They weren't fostered. They weren't there. They weren't cared for. They weren't nurtured. So really growing up and learning is like maturing is like, you have to take care of yourself at the end of the day. And if you're going to be a barrier to yourself, well, you got to start to dig in and ask some questions.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about gratitude, and I find like that's something that I resonate with a lot, and a lot of guests on here that tap into gratitude. I feel like like the way I look at the world is like gratitude is the one thing that could be magical. Like when you find things to be grateful for and you tap into gratitude, I feel like you'll be able to find more things to be grateful for. Where do you find like that gratitude? Was it like when you were younger, or did it click in when you got more mature? Like where did that understanding of the magic of gratitude come for you?
I'm laughing because I think of my mom.
Oh.
You're right. You got stuff to be grateful for, right? Like, I could just hear her now. Like, there was no choice not to be grateful, right? Like, you had to be grateful. I love her to death, but we had to be grateful. We didn't really, come from a lot. We, when you grow up in a small town, you have a Black last name, you're seen as not a lot as well. And so I think growing up, I had a lot of gratitude for basic things, but I think as I gotten older and a little more spiritual, I found a lot of joy in the small things, like, water and trees and life on earth is beautiful. Nature. And it really is a gift to be here. And I think when I tapped into that gratitude, there was a lot of abundance that kind of flown from that. Like it was like an overflow. And personally, I believe that everything in life is a resource. And if I don't share it, it's a waste. So if I have something that I know that you can use, I'm not using it, I'm going to give it freely. And I know that that's going to come back to me in return. Yeah. I feel like there's an energy or
Amen.
I know right now I got to
Amen.
There's an energy, there's a way of life, there's an energy. And I think when I got old enough to realize, oh Lord, I got a lot to learn.
Oh Lord.
And a long path ahead of me. Yeah. Gratitude was one of it. But I think also like zooming out and having gratitude for like the earth was like paramount for me. Yeah.
Definitely.
Like go hug a tree.
Yeah. Connect with nature. Connect with the world around you. For sure. And speaking of gratitude, values, that was something that you mentioned when you go into certain spaces, sticking to those values and not letting those spaces change those. So maybe if you could just describe a little bit more how you determined what you valued most and how you were able to stick by that in those spaces,
My mom calls me very hot-headed, and also I keep going back to her because she kills me. She says I don't see gray. I believe in black and white, which is very ironic. See, I am a little funny too.
Yeah, the comedy.
But I definitely have a hard time navigating right from wrong. Like I know what's right, but you might not see it as right. You might see it as wrong. Or in the space of like career-wise, I found it very hard not to move with integrity when people lacked it. So like if you have no moral compass, I can't work with you. Like I literally just can't. And it's not because I don't respect what you offer. It's just that I know foundationally, we will not get along. Yeah. Because if you can't walk in that space or have that intention, your best interest is not in the community. It lies elsewhere. So I think for me, like, having some strong values was challenging. Yeah. When we talk about gratitude, when we talk about that flow, when we talk about that abundance, when you follow what you know, when you follow what's in your heart, it comes. So I'd say like, it was definitely challenging and difficult and hard and eye-opening, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change my values to accommodate somebody else's comfortability.
What advice would you give to a young person that might not have been able to tap into what you just talked about, like abundance, gratitude, values? Like, let's say a young person that's 13, 14, what would you say to them? And like, you can talk right to them.
Talk right to them.
Right.
Okay.
That for the wall.
If I could give advice, which I'm not in the business of doing, I would probably say some small things that you can do to start to regulate yourself in a positive manner or to foster questions in a reflective space would be to journal. I've been journaling for the past like 3 years, and I keep all my journals and I go back in them and I see what's come true. I see what I've been able to create, but then I also hold myself accountable and learn from my mistakes because I make mistakes too, and you will too. And I would say another thing that I would do and suggest is meditate, calm the mind, get silent, get still, and start to find yourself.
Spot on. I like that. You seem like a person that really knows themselves, and based on what you said about like understanding like when you were younger to now, I feel like when you just said meditation, it makes sense that you're a person that meditates because you're deeply knowing yourself, and I feel like knowing yourself, knowing your history is paramount to knowing where you're going to go and where you want to succeed in life.
It's true, but you might disrupt some people.
Yeah.
You might
Do it in the
upset some
process.
people.
What did
right?
we say before we started? If you ain't disrupting no people, if you ain't making
got-
the haters mad, you
He
ain't
said,
doing
I gotta
enough.
get back on my business.
You gotta grind harder. Yeah,
you ain't doing enough. If they ain't hating it, you ain't
Yeah,
doing
you-
enough, right?
that's
No,
true.
legit,
That's
yeah.
true, right? So
Definitely.
yeah, you might upset some people, but it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned not showing your hand, but I did want to ask if you had any plans or any goals in the next, maybe I'll say 5 years that you're
Oh wow, 5
trying
years.
to work towards, or if you just go with the flow. Some people, life. Just go
I'm
with the
definitely
flow.
not a go. I have never been a go with the flow type of gal.
Yeah.
I think I was forced into that a little more so recently than anything.
Sorry.
Which life will do that. Universe will do that
Yeah.
when you're a little too
Mhm.
confining on the goals. 5 years, I'm gonna be 30. So that's a
Wow.
milestone,
Milestone.
right? Like I'm like, whoa.
3-0.
By 30, I want to do so many things. So this
Yeah.
is a little difficult. Well, I want to travel. I have a couple places. Like I'd love to travel the world a little bit more. And I've been, granted the opportunity to do so in this work. So I've been really blessed to do that. And I really appreciate that. But something more tangible is like I want to pursue law. So I'm studying for my LSAT. I
Good job.
plan to write in fall. And
Oh, what?
yeah, I've been
You got this.
studying.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll be applying for the 26, 27 cohort with
Nice.
IB&M at Dal, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of work ahead of me. And I'd like to do environmental law.
Best
There
of
we go.
luck
That's
with that.
awesome.
Wow.
Wow. I went through the IB&M program.
Yeah, you did,
Yeah,
did
yeah,
you?
yeah,
How
yeah.
was that?
It was good. I liked it.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about not necessarily environmental racism, but like it is environmental racism now that I'm thinking about it because there was laws literally made up that prevented Black people from progressing. And like if I didn't go through the IB&M program, pre-law and all that stuff, I wouldn't learn that. I wouldn't even
Right.
have knew that. But then seeing that, I'm just like, bro,
Strategic.
racism is real. It's
Strategic.
in the law.
Mhm.
Like you can see it in history, and like not to say like obviously you knew it from before, but like when you see it in the cases that you're reading, based on like the African Nova Scotian people, the Mi'kmaq people,
Yeah.
the Native people, and you're
Yeah.
just like, this is crazy. Like they literally, they didn't put us in jails. They put us in like like
Confined.
yeah, like
Yeah, they use nature law, human law or
Yeah.
nature law against us, right?
Yeah.
Like I think very philosophically sometimes, like I think everything is kind of a paradox. And I think even doing this work is very paradoxical as well. Which I'll say was challenging in continuing to do the work. There was a time where I stopped doing this work because I felt like I have to make space for somebody else to come in here and do this. I can't be the only one to be doing this. And I also needed to find myself a little bit more as to why am I doing this? And when I found that, I was able to use that as my like North Star guiding star. But yeah, it's really hard at the end of the day when you're just a person and when you separate yourself from the illusions of society or when you try to transcend them in a way, it's like, well, I'm doing this work and I believe in it, yet I also just believe in this experience here on earth. And I get right woo and spiritual because it really does like bend and mend in such a way that's like, well, I could just be in a cabin in the woods with no electronics, just enjoying
just
life
doing
the way we used to be.
Supposed to.
But then on the other hand, I'm like, oh no, I got to be in here writing policies and doing this and being a lawyer and because I need to make
Yeah.
change. So
Yeah.
I found that really hard to balance.
Yeah.
And I still kind of do
Yeah.
a little bit, but I make space for both of those personalities to come out when it's appropriate. But
Yeah.
I find that's my escape.
I think that makes sense. It's like, there's things that need to be done in the world, and then there's some things that you may not be able to do. So it's like the balance of the.
Yeah. And actually I learned that, I learned from Ashley Hill how to stay in my own lane.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that she does so well. I love it. And at one time, I'm a big picture thinker, so I couldn't understand that way of seeing. But it wasn't until I started working with Ashley closely at the Prep Academy that her focus and her precision and her mission inspired me to do the same. And, with working with her and seeing how she run prep and managed prep, I wouldn't have been able to feel confident and comfortable to go and start a nonprofit. Never in a million years I would have been able to see myself in that space.
Yeah.
And, I still need to reach out and tell her that because, for me, her experience showed me I can also do this too. And her skill set is amazing.
Shout out,
Yeah,
Yeah.
shout out Ashley. Shout out you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
sure. I have another question, and if you're not comfortable answering this question, feel free to
Okay.
express that. But it's honestly from my curiosity. Spirituality is a big thing, I feel like, in community, and you speak a lot about your spiritual journey. Are you comfortable sharing what that spiritual journey looked like? Because I feel like it made a really big impact on you in the way that you operate in life.
Yeah, it did. It changed my life for sure.
Yeah.
And I always, this is another like example of like where I hide pieces of myself to the
Yeah.
world. Because I can come in various types, and I feel like sometimes it's not always accepted in this space, but yeah, I am very spiritual, and I can't help but be very spiritual.
Yeah.
It's just who I am.
Yeah. I love that.
I would say it started when I was exposed to the Transformative Leadership Initiative at Windhorse, which is now a Seedalisk. And so it's a beautiful property in the middle of nowhere. So it's along a river, Lake Wenzel. Sorry, not river, lake. And that was the first time since I was a kid I was able to like reconnect with nature in a way that wasn't forced. But at first I was like, oh, I don't know if I really like this. Like, you know, I'm definitely rural, so I can't take that part out of me.
Can't take it.
I cannot. So there is that, but I would say it started there when I moved out of my hometown. I was shaken up. You know, I had some experiences during COVID that also altered my life path. Like before then, I was like someone that very happy, positive, and then life really hit me, and you know, it took me to a low point where I was like, why do I feel this way, and where is this coming from? And I started to research like the scale of consciousness, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And so when I started to realize more consciously how my body felt and where I was, and I was meditating at this time too, like, you know, I was meditating for years prior to, you know, when I really felt woo and spirituals. I call it woo,
like
right?
that.
I call it right woo. But I was meditating and life hit me. So then I said, I got to do something about this. I started to feel this like underlying like fire. And I was like, if I continue to sit in this environment and if I continue to sit here, nothing's going to change. And I might hear that things might change. I might dream or hope, but I knew deep down that I had to be the one to make the change for myself. And so I did. And I started to ask myself like, but what do I really want to do? And what experiences do I really want to foster? And that's when everything started clicking into place. Like it was freaky. So, you know, I'm in Shelburne, I'm looking at this apartment and I'm like, I love it. I want it. Like at this point I was dreaming every day, every single day. Like, this is what I want. I know I want this. I don't know how I'm going to get this, but I've got it already. And I can remember going on my iPad and designing the apartment the way I wanted it to look. And I viewed it, like I viewed it online. This lady was subletting it. Come back. I said, I'm really interested. I'd like to move as soon as possible. Like, please let me know what's up. She says, I just heard back. I can't sublet in this apartment building. I said, that's okay. I completely understand. So I went onto the site and I was like, well, I'll just go inquire myself. What's the worst that can happen? And I inquired. I went in and I looked at, I wanted 301. I got 401. I went in and I looked at 516. I said, oh no, it's too small. It's not going to work for me. I don't really like it. I said, no problem. I go back home, travel home, and I get a phone call. Hey, we have the same floor plan that you want, just one story up. I said, just give it to me. I want it. And then the next day I got my offer with the Prep Academy. So I had a full-time job and I unseen signed for my lease. And I moved within 2 weeks.
Wow, manifesting.
Yeah.
So
working towards it.
I think for me that was eye-opening, and at that point I didn't realize what was happening. But I felt that like that feeling I'll never forget, because that's when I knew something was for me. And when I felt that feeling, I will now never take something that's not for me. I can't because I know what it feels like to take something that's for me. So, you know, that's one example of some experiences that I've had around, some woo-woo stuff that just brought me into,
Stay tapped into that feeling.
100%. Yes, never lose that.
Stay tapped into that energy, meditate, frequency, journal.
Alignments. Oh my goodness. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
So, amazing conversation so far. Just wondering whether there's something we didn't touch on that you'd like for us to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we'll shed light onto what's happening now in the news. Like, we're seeing our communities on fire with this environmental racism panel report not coming out. So, there was comments made by the new Minister of Justice that they are not releasing the environmental racism report recommendations.
Why is that?
I'd love to know just as much as everybody else. Yeah, I had the privilege to work on this panel in 2023, and I left. I was hired in June 2023, and I left in September. And I think for me, this was the first thing that we've seen in Canada. So that's paramount. This was something that was foundational, based out of Nova Scotia. Grassroots movements came out of Nova Scotia. Legislation came out of Nova Scotia. The examples are concrete, rooted in our communities. And so I was really, really excited and jazzed about the opportunity to work on something that was so key to the community.
Yeah.
And so to hear today that we're not going to see those recommendations, it's disappointing. It's disheartening.
So the public's not going to see it, but the people behind the scenes are going to see it, or?
Yeah. So they're saying that it'll be an internal report, although that was not the intention. There was budgeted community engagement and consultation. There's, the terms of reference that was drafted was public information. Now it's not public information. So you have to ask yourself, how many times is this government going to commit to something and then in their own legislation find a loophole or find a way not to do it the right way?
Yeah, breach the trust, breach community trust in doing so.
Yeah.
So could that have been their intention from the beginning, or no?
It could have been. I mean, if we look at the panel members, they're all well-respected community advocates and really had some great expertise. So I don't know what their intention was. I will say it definitely didn't align to my values in terms of what I had rooted for community. And I think, again, that piece of like deciding what's more important. And that's why I always say now, like, there's no ego in community work. Like, you need to put the you and the I aside to get to the we and the us. Difficult lessons learned for me in that space. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a great question for the minister. I think, like, you wrote the legislation. What are you going to do with your own act?
And who makes the decision? Like, is it the panel or people, the folks' decision, or the one person's decision? Like, who decides if it's going to be out or not? Or?
It seems like right now it's lying with the minister. It's a ministerial decision. I haven't heard comments from the Environment and Climate Change Minister, Minister Hallman. But I know that he's an amazing advocate for the community and really supports us. So again, we're surprised genuinely to know that, we're not going to know what this is. Because again, this would outline provincial jurisdiction on environmental racism. So environmental racism is a weird intersect where it doesn't really have constitutional delineage or rights. So meaning, like, in the constitutional acts of human rights and freedoms, it doesn't say that environmental racism is something that has to be protected against. So therefore, the federal government doesn't have it mandated in their constitution. As people, we're not protected against it. Us, way more susceptible than anybody else. So there's loopholes within laws and legislation that just don't protect us and don't prohibit it either.
And they don't want to, like, set precedent on that or something like that? Or?
That's their mistake. It's a massive mistake by Nova Scotia not to, when they had the opportunity to lay it out. Because now you have the federal landscape basically saying, well, this is what we're going to do to address, assess, and prevent environmental racism, but also advance environmental justice. So it makes it now a little sticky for the province to be like, we have to accept responsibility in these areas, but we don't want to because there's been years of oppression, and systemic racism and issues and impacts that have killed people from this. And if we do so,
they don't want to
accountability.
They don't want to be accountable. So is this like a Shelburne thing, or is this all African Nova Scotian communities?
This is a national thing.
This is
so they really would have had massive reach in the federal landscape if they would have actually had, like,
and they can't revoke this decision to withhold the recommendations. Like, this is crazy.
I hope they will.
Is it a possibility? Okay.
I hope they will. I really do. I hope they'll reconsider that this is the best interest for the public
Yeah.
and for our government. If we believe in peace, order, and good
Yes.
government, this is a decision that needs to be made.
It needs to, yeah.
We've seen Honorable Member Susie Hansen
Yeah.
address this in the committee and make amendments to saying, whoa,
Yeah,
y'all got a report back in 2021
Yeah.
saying this is real and an issue,
Yeah.
yet you still have lacked commitment to addressing the issue. So what does this really say about the political landscape that we're in? And what does it also say about what we're willing to do for our communities?
Yeah, 100%.
It's like one of them George Bush doesn't care about black people type of things.
Different font.
That's what I
Yes,
got felt
different
from
font.
it.
exactly,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
font. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
100%.
yeah, different
Wow.
font.
Thank you for sharing that and shedding light on that. Yeah, I'm interested to see where disappointment after disappointment, honestly.
You know, I said this in council recently. I presented to the municipality of Shelburne, and they asked me questions like, "Well, you know, what are you gonna do if the town doesn't comply or talk to you or tell you?" I said, "Well, I'm not in the business of waiting for nobody.
Yeah.
First and foremost. So we'll go out and we
Yeah.
will, fundraise
do,
or
yeah.
we'll do community-based activities
Yeah.
to ensure we get the resources we deserve."
Yeah.
It's that simple to me.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't do it for me as a system that's supposed to be here for people,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll find another way.
We'll do it ourselves.
Yeah,
100%.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But don't come knocking on the door when, people have access to clean water
Yeah.
and you need a photo op.
Yeah.
Not
Straight
going to
up.
happen.
Straight up.
Work's
Yeah.
been done.
Yeah.
Don't ask no questions about
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hey,
Go.
you talking real right
Yeah,
now.
the white savior trope. White savior trope. Going into places.
Oh,
where-
because that'd be getting me. That'd be getting
I
me.
know. Going into places where you have no business going and then acting, making promises and then breaking those promises and breaching that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then don't be shocked at the table when nobody want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I wonder why I can't engage the community. Probably because nobody likes or trusts you.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and you're not reporting back. That's a big thing too, a big theme with research and studies. And you gather the information from community, and they don't know what happens with it, and then they just never report back. And you will never build trust of community operating that way.
No,
Yeah,
like
no.
you said.
For real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
But yeah.
horrible because half the time they don't even know what's happening to that
No.
data either, right?
Mm-mm.
They're just someone
Just
that's
out
in
there.
the system that's doing their job. And
Yeah.
it gets lost or it gets
Yeah.
duplicated or, it's not valid data.
yeah,
It's just something to prove a point or to make the government look good. So,
Mhm.
there's various ways of making data look great.
yeah.
And then there's also various ways of making data look horrible
Yes.
and in your favor. So it depends on the pendulum of which you'd like to
Yes.
choose, but it's all perspective.
Variables, biases, and the way that they kind
Absolutely.
of word and frame that information to serve a purpose. For
Yeah.
sure, is a big theme.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you might want to?
Yeah.
Because I know, like, you talked about having a white mom and a black dad, and I got a white mom, black dad.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to explore that. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
Because, like, growing up for me, it was like, when I'm with white people, they like I'm black. When I'm with the black people, they like I'm white. So then it's like, did you ever have that identity
crisis.
thing?
Yeah.
Don't even get me started. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I
So
did.
like maybe like unpack that a little bit so someone else that might be going through what we went through, they can maybe navigate it easier.
Okay. I don't know if there's any good way to navigate it, honestly, to be completely honest. I think it's a very individual experience because I think a lot of the times, like, I can't help but I love putting myself in other people's or other shoes or other, experiences or perspectives. And it's like, what if my dad was white? Like, how would that have translated into my life? Like, how that would have changed me so much. Like, I think about that a lot. Like, if that it would have been reversed. So, a lot of the times back in the day, in town, I felt like I was extremely black. And then when I came to, and like, come on, like, let's be real, right? And then when I come to Halifax or when I come to Ottawa or wherever I go, well, you're not black enough. You never knew what racism was. You didn't experience it. But I think for me, I valued that perspective of not being black enough because to some degree, like, I will never experience it to a person that's darker than me. So like, I think also not being naive to colorism was really, really important to me, but also my friends too, like the people that I hung around, we talked about that kind of thing, like what that felt like, because most of us were mixed. Some of us were white, like, they were white passing.
Yeah.
And even recently we had a poet, I guess? A poet come in and do some spoken word around how that felt. And she was like, you know, I feel the ancestors with me, and I feel like a Black woman, but in the space of how I look, I'm seen as a white woman. And how do I navigate this space? It's like internal dialogue, and I feel like I'm being ripped apart. For me, I didn't have to navigate that as much. My mom was always like very strong and being proud of who I was, even when I didn't think that she was being there for me. Like, I think now I really appreciate the ways in which, like, you know, I was never allowed to dye my hair. I was never allowed to straighten my hair. I was never allowed to wear makeup. I was never allowed to, you know, do certain things or act certain ways. Also, my dad did that too. But I think between the both of them, they did a really good job of ensuring that I never lost the real touch of myself. You know, I went along the lines and stuff, and now I've expanded. But, you know,
But
I
grounding
think,
you in that,
they made sure that I was always still me.
Definitely. Valuing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for touching on that as well. That was actually a question that I was also considering,
it's
so I'm
not
glad
easy.
you touched on that.
Because, like, you know, I'm leading the Black Lives Matter march, and my white grandmother is in the front row crying, you know, with the biggest sign, like, Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, it's a weird space to be in because a lot of times I see a lot of good folks trying to be allies and accomplices. I really strongly believe in accomplices more so. But, you know, I see them, and then I also see the other side of it where it's really nasty and hateful. And then on the same side as, you know, Black folks and African Nova Scotians, like, if I don't drop that I'm from Shelburne, or if I don't drop that I'm a Hartley, some people don't know that I'm African Nova Scotian or Black, right? And I think for me, finding that confidence, being rooted, again, going back to that ancestor piece, like being rooted in community. I don't care if you think I'm Black enough. I don't care. I really don't. Because my Blackness is beautiful and it varies on a scale. So I think I got really confident in that, and there were certain things that made me feel more empowered. I put myself in places and positions, you know, like it was intentional that I moved on Gottagen. And I put myself in that space and I walked around the community and I talked to people. And, you know, I'll never forget Kate McDonald. Oh, shout out Kate. She took me to the square and she was like, come on in, introduced me to a bunch of people, you know. And here I am just sitting here drumming in the square. And at first I was a little nervous, like, oh, shoot, like this is intimidating. But then I just felt so comfortable and I felt like I was just home in Shelburne. So there's certain things that will always kind of stick with me, and there's people that'll always make sure that I'm rooted in that, which I really appreciate. But yeah, it's a tough space to navigate. You know, if I'm being honest, I would say, like, it's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to, you know, have someone that looks like you to pick that apart. I had a Black therapist, and when I explained to her that I had a white mom and a Black dad, and, you know, there was like divorce and separation, that also helped me, you know, put things into perspective in a way that I couldn't. And I think that's a little bit taboo in our community to talk about. Like, you know, it's okay to ask for help in that space. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a formal therapy either. Like, it can be a really good friend. It can be a really good mentor. It can be a grandmother. It can be someone in your life that can shed light to, you know, what that was like. But for me, I'd say it's okay to, you know, ask for help and pick that apart when you need to.
Yeah, 100%. I find a lot of folks, they either nervous or scared or they don't want to ask for help. But I feel like one conversation like this can help a kid realize, like, we all going through the same thing and it's not that bad. Like, when you get older and you mature, like, for me, it's just like, I am what I am. And when you accept you for you, like, even when I was a kid, like, my name's Trevor Silver. I thought my name was like the whitest name ever. I didn't even like my name. And then now I have a brand that's my name.
Right.
So it's like, you learn to love yourself more, and like you accept yourself. And when you accept yourself, you love yourself, and then you go beyond that. You create whoever you want to be.
Exactly. And then you get to pour that love into other people that care about you, right? When you show up in the world in that space, it becomes a beautiful,
because it's hard to love other people when you don't love you. And then it's like, sometimes it's hard to find love for yourself if no one else is pouring the love into you. But then when you unlock the love, you live with love, you lead with love. And you talked about the consciousness thing earlier. Right. It's like, love is like one of the...
it's a high vibe.
So
you got to get on that. You got to get on that. You got to get on that, right? Even when people can't love you, you can still love them. You can love them.
And I find that's important, to be able to, like, love that enemy, or like love people that hate you or that people have done you wrong. When you can love through that, that's when you, like, unlock something that's different. Like, you know? You know,
I learned that a lot. I walked into 2025 saying no enemies. Don't even got to be my friend, but no enemies.
Yeah.
You can be peaceful. I want peace in my life, and that's what I'll do. And, you know, you make me think of something that I also learned, which is, this is going to get woo, but, you know, I know my story. God knows my story and seen it. I don't need to explain it to you.
Yeah.
And you don't need to know everything. Yeah. And that's fine.
You don't owe that to them. Yeah.
No.
There you go.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's right.
Perfect.
I like it.
Yes. All right. Do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I'll try to explain the one
Oh,
word
I
for
know
once.
it.
Okay.
Regular.
I was doing my research.
So Vanessa has watched the episode multiple times, so she knows about the one word Checo. Some of you guys might not know about the one word Checo because you guys are new, or this is your 10th time watching. Shout out to you if you're one of those. So the one word is basically one word for your vibe from this conversation or from how you're feeling on the other side of the camera or the other side of your screen. And yeah, we're just going to probably get into it. So one word, just drop it either in the comments, hashtag it, whatever you want to do, but leave your one word. And we about to leave ours.
Yeah. All right. I got mine.
I'm going to let you
Okay,
guys
yeah,
go.
go
And
for it.
hopefully you ain't
Go
got my
for it.
word.
I know. And that's why we have to jump. Last time I was like, let me jump
Like,
to
let
it
me
first.
put 2 words in my brain so like if they steal it.
I swear I got a backup too, because sometimes we be on the same wavelength and we'll like, and I'll say a word and I'm like, damn, yeah, the vibes are there. But yeah, so my word is grounded. So I feel like spiritually being grounded in who you are and your identity, grounded in community, grounded in the environment around you. I feel like grounded was a big theme that stood out with this conversation with you. And thank you also for inspiring me through that conversation as well with getting grounded. So yeah.
You want me to go?
No, yeah,
all right.
definitely.
That also came to my mind too, so I'm glad I didn't settle on that one. But it's very similar because what I thought was earthy. Like it feels like with the green in here, the vibes, like it feels very peaceful, wholesome. You know, like it feels awesome. So I just want to say thank you so much for making me feel,
Thank you.
earthy and grounded and
the hug a
part of this
tree.
space.
I wanted to say it with the ground. I hug a tree.
So my word, I'm trying to like pinpoint what the word is I can't like quite grasp it, but it's I'm just gonna say history, because there's a bunch of different stuff, but knowing your history, knowing yourself, I wanted to figure out a word that's like know thyself in one word, but like history, like knowing your history is gonna be crucial. It's gonna give you confidence. It's gonna give you to know where you came from, to know where you're going, to give you that fuel, and just recognize that like. We come, obviously there's history behind us and there's history ahead of us, and it's on us to get to the history ahead of us. Like if we're either going to have kids or not have kids, or what legacy are we going to leave, I think it's important to understand that history of like what's going to be left. Like I used to think, not to go on a tangent or anything, I used to think like I needed to have kids in order for like my legacy to live on, but it's not just you having kids. It could be the ideas that you have or like the history that you leave when you're here. It's like, will people remember you 100 years from now? And I feel like if you have intentions of being remembered for 100 years from now, then you'll do things in the world that will be remembered for 100 years from now. So the history is my word.
Love that. Impact. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode. This episode was phenomenal.
Yeah, this episode was fire.
Yeah, I'm going to put that
all that woohoo stuff you're talking about, it wasn't woohoo. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and align with you on a lot of the viewpoints there. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming on. Thank you all for tuning in. For the regulars, shout out to you. If you're a new person, great to see you and see you at the next episode. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. What else is it, Trev? What else do they got to do?
Stay connected to your community. If you're not from community, get plugged in with community. I like what you said about not allies. What was the word you were
Accomplices.
saying? Accomplices. Yeah, like let's work together. Let's do things together in community and keep it locked here.
And make sure you engage with our Feature Friday community and make sure you comment, do all of that good stuff. And we'll see you at the next episode. See y'all there. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to our Feature Friday podcast. And just wanted to make sure that you guys are connected on all platforms. So wherever you're tuning in, maybe even leave us a 5-star review.
If you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe.
And on our social medias as well, you can follow us at ANS Lab or at African Nova Scotian Youth Lab as well on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We got the whole mumble jumble. It'll be in our link tree in our bio.
Don't forget to enter our contest that we have in each episode.
And the way to enter that contest will be sprinkled throughout our episodes, so make sure that you're listening and paying attention.
Each episode may be different, but comment below wherever you are.
And if you don't use social media and you're one of those people, you can even reach out to us by email at anslab@onenorthend.com.
The details are in the episode description.
And last but not least, we want to make sure that we get you guys connected to our resource, our network of resources, the Grapevine newsletter. So to get subscribed, you can check the link in our bio and subscribe yourself. But if you're not that tech savvy, you can also email us at anslab@onenorthend.com and we can get you hooked up.
We'll see you on the next episode.
See you next month.
Let's get it.
Feature Friday. Friday.
What's your favorite thing about Fridays?
That's a good question.
The features.